A recent high school graduate faces important decisions about the future and how to deal with her overbearing mother. Author Kevin Smokler joins us to discuss getting laughed at by publicists, an especially tough Christmas, and a cheesy hypothetical bake sale. Then we find out if Real Women Have Curves stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 462 of The Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and joining me as always is Alan Noah, my buddy and pal and the director of this podcast. How you doing, Al?
Hi, I am doing very well, and joining the two of us once again is our buddy, our friend, Kevin Smokler. Welcome back to the show, Kevin.
Gentlemen, great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back.
Yes, we love having you on. We actually have a special reason to invite you on this time around. Author Kevin Smokler, you've got a brand new book coming out. It's called Break the Frame. James and I know all about it because we adore you and we follow you and all of your moves. But please tell our listeners what Break the Frame is all about.
First of all, applause to you, gentlemen, for doing this for long enough that I have been able to come back 8 years later when the next book came out. I was doing a few things in between, but it's really more a tribute to your staying power than mine.
Oh, thank you.
My new book, which comes out May 22nd, is called Break the Frame: Conversations with Women Filmmakers. It is 24 career-spanning interviews with 24 directors, the finest directors working in movies and TV series today, as I like to call it. Although I don't need to because their talent and track record speaks for themselves. I spent 3 years interviewing women filmmakers. It was one of the most rewarding creative things I've ever done.
It's a great idea for a book. Clearly, you are a lover of movies and music and pop culture in general. What made you decide that you wanted to interview all of these female directors?
I was really fortunate when I was touring my last book, Brat Pack America, which is about 80s teen movies, that I got to do something at New York Comic Con. During the Q&A, a student from the NYU film program asked the panel that I was moderating, why aren't more movies directed by women? And the panel answered very well. And I could tell the person who asked the question was not satisfied with their answer, even though the panel had answered very well. And it was my job as the moderator to say, next question, please. But I couldn't keep my big mouth shut. And I just said, I think you point to a very real problem. We all know that. It is our job as the audience, because we are here at Comic-Con, which is a fan conference. Nothing happens here without us. It is our job in the audience to watch everything that is directed by women and to take the ones we like, the movies and TV shows we like, and to talk about them endlessly. Not just when they're new, not just when they win Oscars, not just when they launch talent, but all the time. We don't have the power to greenlight movies and fix studio budgets and hire directors to make the movies and TV shows of our dreams. We do have the power to put our support behind them. And the panel afterwards, which was very generous of them because I really should have just kept my big mouth shut, turned to me and said, you may have something there. And that's kind of where it began, because the more I dug into the topic, the more I realized that we have women directors to thank for things like the movie stardom of Jennifer Lawrence or of Ryan Gosling or of Paul Rudd or Sean Penn, the Oscar win of Charlize Theron. And this just to say nothing of the great movies and TV shows that those things happened in. These are all the contributions of stuff directed by women. We as an audience are perilously blind to that. That is a thing we ourselves can do better at, and we have the power to do better at. And if we wish the world of movies and TV to be different, to be more enlightened, to reflect the world as we'd like it to be rather than as it is, we have a responsibility to do that.
I love that. And as you were putting together this list of directors that you wanted to talk to, I'm sure there were some logistical challenges of getting into the same room as some of these directors because they're big name directors and they're making movies. To the extent that you're comfortable telling us, like, what were some of the challenges of just getting to talk to some of these women?
The first challenge was the pandemic, so I didn't get to talk to any of them in person, which was unfortunate. The second challenge, which is actually a good one, and I'm mad about for a second, is that these were all busy people. And thank God, I'd rather have them be busy people who are working, who had no time for me, than directors who are getting the shaft by their industry and therefore had all the time in the world to talk to me. Every one of them was busy, which was great. So it made it all the more special that they had time to spare for me, time that they really didn't have to give. That being said, I did get laughed at by some publicists. That's a mean way of putting it. No, nobody laughed at me. They were all very nice, but I did get several publicists saying, "Nice try, but no." The 24 interviews I was able to schedule and conduct were amazing. Changed my life.
Are you going to be at Comic-Con this year at all to promote it and bring it full circle?
I would love to. You know, I still have relationships with some of the folks who run Comic-Con and the adjacent conferences around it. I'll do all the begging and pleading I can. They certainly don't have to say yes to me, but I have a nice story. So maybe I can turn up with that nice story and say, I'd love to bring it full circle like you're suggesting, James. What they'll probably say is, that's very nice. Nobody knows who the hell you are. And can you get 2 or 3 of the directors in your books to show up for something like this? If so, perhaps we'll talk.
You're right. That's what they could do. So hopefully maybe you can work something out.
If you can, we'll be there. James and I will show up.
Thank you. That's really nice of you. I had no idea when I went in 2016. It was amazing to be there, but it was also like, I think they had crammed me in at the last minute, and it was a Sunday afternoon. All the big stuff had been announced already. Everybody who had a commute home was already heading for the exits, and there were 30 other things happening at the same time as mine. And then for a room that held about 100 people, like 200 plus showed up. I couldn't believe it. One for me, it was for the panel. And so I really just sort of grabbed the mast and tried to keep the ship afloat as the moderator. But the panel was why they were there.
Who was on that panel?
It was a small group of directors of great movies, some of whom I was able to speak for this book and some of whom who were not. So in the interest of privacy, I don't talk about who was actually on that panel.
Fair.
You know, when you do speak at your next panel and we're in the audience, when Alan goes to Comic-Cons, he dresses as Queen Amidala from episode 1, full royal outfit.
I've never been to a Comic-Con, unlike you, James, but if that's what it takes, sure, I will be totally willing to do that. But your book, Kevin, leads us to the movie that we're talking about today, because Real Women Have Curves was directed by Patricia Cardozo, who's one of the directors that you interviewed in your book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was amazing to talk to Professor Cardozo. She is a professor of film and media studies and directing. I don't have her complete title correct, I'm positive, but she's a professor at UC Riverside. So I was able, between directing and classes, and she's also on the governing board of the Academy now. So, which I found out is like having a part-time job in addition to your real job. It was really amazing to get to talk to her, and my timing was good, even though I didn't know it was good. The new movie museum in Los Angeles had just opened up, and Real Women Have Curves was part of the inaugural exhibit. And it was in a gallery right next to Citizen Kane. So I was able to say to Professor Cardozo, tell me what that experience was like. And she told me this wonderful story about, like, she saves everything. And so she had all of the Real Women Have Curves paraphernalia in boxes in her garage. It took several months to sort of get it into museum ready form. And she worked with one of the chief curators at the new Academy Museum, and an amazing story for a movie that is completely deserving of that kind of acclaim and prestige placement.
Wow. All right. Well, let's get into Real Women Have Curves. James, do you want to give our listeners a synopsis of what the movie's all about?
Sure. This movie is about Ana Garcia, an 18-year-old Mexican-American living in East Los Angeles. Ana is caught between her aspirations of attending Columbia University and her family's expectations that she work in her sister's struggling garment factory. Anna's mother, Carmen, insists that Ana conform to traditional roles, urging her to lose weight, marry, and settle down. Meanwhile, Anna's supportive father and sister recognize her potential beyond the confines of their community. As Ana works alongside other Latino women in the factory, she gains a deeper appreciation for their sisterhood and camaraderie, leading to a newfound confidence in her body, identity, and future.
Right. So when this movie came out in 2002, I'm guessing it wasn't a blockbuster, but how did it do at the box office, James?
It actually didn't do too bad. It opened on October 18th, 2002, and it had a reported $3 million budget. Basically, it made several hundred thousand every week, and it wound up being $5.8 million domestically, about 7 point something worldwide, and it won a ton of awards.
Yeah. Okay, so James and we just watched it for the first time for this podcast. Kevin, when was the first time you saw the movie?
I don't think I saw it in theaters, but around the time it came out, I had just moved to San Francisco and I was working in a video store. And it was a very, very popular rental with all kinds of people. It was hard to keep on the shelves. This was before this sort of supernova status of its star America Ferrera. It is unquestionable that we learn of America Ferrera through this movie. She was only 17 when she did it. She had done a few minor things, but essentially she was a theater kid from the San Fernando Valley. And this is the movie that introduces the world to her. It did not have the profile at the time that Ugly Betty had, that the things she would do later on. And the staying power of Real Women Have Curves, for better or for worse, is inseparable from the stratospheric rise of the national treasure known as America Ferrera.
You know, I went into this film completely blind, and when I saw America Ferrera, I loved it because she is so charming, and she was in this not really talked about sitcom called Superstore. She was delightful in it, and then she left, and the show really sunk after she had left.
There are certain actors that kind of unfold like a flower unfolding, where you see them in 5 or 6 movies, and then in the 7th one, you're like, oh, I get it now. America Ferrera is like an asteroid that crashes from the sky. And there is another group of actors like her where you see them immediately and you're like, that is a movie star. And she is one of those people. You turn on the first 10 minutes of Real Women Have Curves and you're like, who is that? Some of it is about charisma. Some of it is about aesthetics. Most of it is an indefinable quality.
Yeah, I'm really not familiar with a lot of her work, to be honest. But from what I know, Ugly Betty was also about, I guess, body positivity and not being confined simply by the way that you look. I mean, I kind of am getting that just from the title of the show. I believe that's also true of Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. So it's kind of interesting that sort of became America Ferrera's thing, this idea that you're more than just what you look like on the outside.
And, you know, that almost is a slight flaw in that she always played Ugly Betty. And in this one, the character that she plays, Anna, is supposed to have self-esteem issues. You know, Ugly Betty was never ugly. And like Anne Hathaway, before her makeover in Princess Diaries, just because she had the glasses in her hair, Rachel Lee Cook and She's All That, just before the makeover, they were never actually ugly. They're just Hollywood ugly. And she's not even Hollywood ugly. She's a lovely looking woman.
It's also worth mentioning that Real Women Have Curves itself is just a stunningly beautiful looking movie. It's just filmed in this absolutely lush and gorgeous way. An overflowing trash can looks beautiful in Real Women Have Curves. So everybody in that movie had the advantage of how well the movie was photographed and how conscious Patricia Cardozo was of making the Boyle Heights neighborhood of Los Angeles look amazing. But you're absolutely right. America Ferrera is a stunning looking person aesthetically. She was 17 in this movie. She's in her early 40s now, and she is still stunning looking.
Kevin, because you mentioned Patricia Cardozo, obviously you don't want to give away everything that's in the book because our listeners have to buy the book and pre-order the book and get their hands on a copy. But what were some of the things that you're willing to tell us that she mentioned about directing this movie?
Well, one is the one I just said. She was like, if we're going to film this in Boyle Heights and in Echo Park and neighborhoods on the east side of Los Angeles, those neighborhoods are going to look amazing. And I think she saw the coming of age story, which, by the way, is an interpretation of the material that Professor Cardozo added. The original stage play that Real Women Have Curves is based on is largely about the factory and is largely about the relationships between the women who work in the factory, including Anna. But it is a workplace story and not a coming of age mother-daughter story. That is Patricia Cardozo's interpretation of the material. And she saw this as a very troubled but beautiful time in life. So the sweetness and the lushness by which the movie was filmed was all reflective of that.
I don't know if it's in the stage play, but I would imagine that the climax of the film, when the women kind of, have that body positivity moment, that scene, I assume if that's in the play, the audience must go crazy for that.
The scene you're talking about, which I'm sure is known by some more interesting name than the one I gave it when I talked to Professor Cardozo, is just the underwear scene, which is the employees of the factory end up in a conversation about the flaws of their own body, and to demonstrate those flaws, they start taking off their clothes. It's also a scorchingly hot day, so there's another motivation for doing it. But instead of being critical of each other, they end up praising each other. And it's a lovely moment. It is the scene in this movie that will outlive all of us and our grandchildren. It is a contemporary classic of cinema, that scene. It is also, by the way, hilariously funny because the late, great actress Lupe Ontiveros, playing Anna's mother, who also works at the factory, is reacting to all of this. She doesn't say much, but it's all on her face. And because she's such an incredible character actress, really one of the great character actresses of our time, it gives an entirely other dimension to this scene. It is both life-affirming and hilarious at the same time. Professor Cardozo told me that when she did this scene, she was actually afraid that in order to keep everybody tuned in to the motivation of the scene, that she might have to strip down to her underwear. So she said, I went out and bought really expensive, nice underwear for this moment, but I didn't actually end up having to do it. The actresses got there all by themselves. By the way, if the name Lupe Ontiveros is not immediately familiar to you, she's not with us anymore, but she was an actress all the way back to the late 1970s. She sort of got her start in the movies of Gregory Nava, like El Norte. She, of course, was the maid with all of the great lines in The Goonies.
Ay, Dios mío!
Yes, who gets yelled at by Jack Nicholson in Is As Good as It Gets.
Right.
And long before he was famous for The White Lotus, Mike White was famous for a movie called Chuck and Buck, where his main character puts on a play at a community theater, and the community theater is managed by a wisecracking cynic who's seen it all, played by Lupe Ontiveros.
I've actually seen El Norte. I had one of those horrible teachers in Spanish teachers in high school that would just like press play on a VHS and not teach for 2 weeks, and that was the movie. It's about like the coyotes that smuggled people north over the border, right?
It's a sad movie.
Very sad.
Especially because it's really, you can tell it's really the story of Gregory Nava's parents, who probably immigrated to this country, and in that fashion somehow. Gregory Nava, of course, would do Mi Familia and a bunch of other movies later on, Selena, and El Norte is a it is a really lovely movie, and it has a similar quality to Real Women Have Curves in that as you're watching it, you're barely cognizant of the fact that a movie is happening. It's that absorbing. You watch enough movies and you can tell when you're watching something where everybody involved is just at the absolute top of their game.
You bring up a great point with that scene, the underwear scene, in that it really is Lupe Ontiveros that really brings it together, because she's the straight woman in that. Because I've been noticing that a lot more. My girlfriend happens to like Abbott and Costello, so I've been watching a lot of that lately. If you've ever seen Who's on First, it's Abbott that's going crazy. He's the one that's not understanding the zany other guy, and that's what's funny. All the women are saying things like, look at this, I got this cellulite, you think that's cellulite, look at this. But she's the one going, what is this, what's going on? And that's what makes it very fun. I agree with you. She was great.
It's twice as hard to be the straight person because you have to do so much more with so much less. You don't get to do the fun stuff when you're the straight person.
Right.
It's way more responsibility than it is glamour. And that's why your role is so much more important.
What did you think of the character Carmen? Because some people refer to Carmen as controlling or overbearing. There's a lot of different ways that she can be defined. What's your perspective? What's your take on the mother-daughter dynamic that's really at the core of this movie?
I think the genius of the screenplay and the directing in this movie is that the movie really feels like it takes its time, but it's also just enough. Real Women Have Curves at 2 hours is too much. It makes Carmen, the character, seem repetitive and nasty, and we don't have the sympathy we end up having for the character. The movie takes its time. There's a scene about 20 minutes in where we learn that Carmen loves Mexican soap operas. Right. And it just kind of happens. It's not connected to the main thrust of the movie. It's just there to tell us who Carmen is. By the end, we really get the sense that Carmen has sacrificed her own happiness and doesn't quite know why. And the harshness she casts towards her daughter is a kind of self-hatred and regret. It's sad, but you have sympathy for that character because the pacing of that movie is just right.
I read something that apparently somewhere along the line, they actually got the note that they needed to make Carmen nicer. I guess test audiences had seen the movie, but they found her to be so despicable that they needed to soften her a little bit. I could kind of see that because I kind of went back and forth while I was watching the movie of, oh, she's terrible. Yeah, but she does love her daughter. Yeah, she does have love in her heart. The way the movie ends, I definitely had a bad taste in my mouth about the character because following quote unquote normal movie rules, she would have said goodbye to Anna, right? Like even if she couldn't open the door when Anna was knocking on the door saying, I'm leaving, let's say goodbye, then maybe she comes running out to the car, or maybe she shows up at the airport, or, then you see Anna walking in Times Square and maybe then she gets a phone call or something, and none of that happens. And I think that is true to the character Carmen that we see, but I think it also just kind of plays with audience expectations, in kind of a meta way. Again, I don't think it's wrong for the character that she doesn't have that moment with her daughter. But then when the movie ends, I was kind of like, man, Carmen sucks. She really should have done that. She really should have just said, goodbye, I love you, good luck, something. And I think the reason that she didn't is because she just couldn't. She doesn't have that in her.
You really do get the sense from the end of that movie, however good you feel when the closing credits roll, that it's going to be a tough first Christmas at the Garcia household when Anna comes home from Colombia.
Yeah, but I think the second will be easier.
Yeah, I think so too.
The final scene is Anna emerges from a subway and just walks down the street. That's not Columbia University that she is emerging from. So she's not hiding out in her campus, which is a beautiful campus, but this is not right when she showed up after the airport. She is now comfortable in New York. She's not scared of New York. Everyone, when they show up to New York, is a little bit scared, but she's very comfortable. I think that this is telling you she is going to be okay. Do I think she's going to start up a $20 million company? No. But do I think she's going to be the first person in her entire family to graduate? And is her mother going to be hysterically crying, proud of her when she does in 4 years? Yes. And that she'll get a nice job and probably take care of her family a little bit. But I think that it's going to be nothing but good things based on the decision she made. It's going to be a tough year. It'll get better and better because she's going to do very well at Columbia and make great friends, and she's going to be successful.
I think it's great, James, that it was clear to you in the scene, because it hasn't always been clear to me, that it's not the day she arrived or the week she arrived. Without text coming up on the screen saying 1 to 2 months later, it's clear.
So, Kevin, you mentioned the play earlier, and I have never seen the play, but just doing a little bit of reading online, I saw that in the play, they talk more about La Migra, immigration coming to raid this factory. And I was just thinking about it in a test of time lens. If that had been in this movie, that would have been very timely watching it now in 2025. This fear of ICE coming in, whether the people who work there are citizens or not, there would just be that fear. And in that sense, I was thinking, oh, it's kind of a shame maybe that wasn't in the movie. But I also think that you don't need that in this movie, because this movie does have a lot with the body positivity stuff and the mother-daughter dynamic and the culture clash thing with Anna and her white boyfriend and going to school in Beverly Hills, and the thing about the dresses that they get paid $16 or $18 or whatever it is per dress that they sell for $600. So there's a lot of stuff in this movie, to the point where I kind of felt like they don't need to have this fear of being deported in there too.
Agreed. I think this movie is about something different. I think Patricia Cardozo's choice to make it about something different was a very good one. And Josefina Lopez, who wrote the play, is sort of a mainstay of the Los Angeles theater community, has written many, many plays, and I believe runs her own theater company in East Los Angeles. If those themes are of interest to you, buy yourself a season subscription at her theater, and you'll be treated to a whole host of themes that are not present in Real Women Have Curves.
I think it was probably a smart idea to leave the immigration angle out of this film, because I think in the same way as something like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, most people are not Greek, but the reason it was so successful is because, oh, I can relate to that in my culture, whatever your culture was.
I think the things we relate to often exist on an emotional level and can often span race, gender, and nation.
Yeah.
I've seen Real Women Have Curves 24 times at this point, mostly because I think the time in life when it is the beginning of spring of your senior year in high school and the future is kind of opening before you is an amazing thing. I have very, very strong memories, probably the strongest memories of my adolescence, from about February to June of my senior year. And so a movie about that, even if this movie is about an 18-year-old Mexican-American girl who's 10 years younger than me, that I related to quite a bit. And it put me right back in that moment in my own life.
Right. And I think that's sort of what movie makers, writers, directors usually are going for, a specificity that is also universal. And that is a tough nut to crack. That is a hard thing to capture. But thinking back to the last movie we did with you, Kevin, Valley Girl, I believe, is also about high school seniors. I couldn't relate to any of those characters because they were popular and going to parties and, getting laid and stuff like that. Like, that wasn't my high school experience. Real Women Have Curves does feel more relatable to me because it's about an awkward teenager and those feelings of I don't belong here. Why don't my parents understand me? I believe that I am destined for this, but my family thinks I should do that. I mean, that transcends culture, region, ethnicity, all of those things. Those are universal truths. Honestly, at first, I kind of thought, should three white guys be talking about this movie? And after watching it, I think, yeah, it's fine because of that, because of those themes that are really relatable to everyone.
One of the things that comes with writing a book about women directors is the natural and incorrect feeling we have as a society to ghettoize them as artists who only make movies about people like them for people like them. And we all engage in it whether we mean to or not. It's the insidious quality of patriarchy. And this exhibits in many ways the ones that I always warn people who want to know more about this project about is, if you ever have the feeling that a woman director came out of nowhere, i.e. Greta Gerwig or Chloe Zhao or someone, someone like that, there's always more than you think. We never say Steven Spielberg came out of nowhere when he did Jaws. We only think that women come out of nowhere. Also, when a movie like Hidden Figures comes along, which wasn't directed by a woman, it was directed by a man, but when Hidden Figures comes along and people say, I need to take my daughters to see that, I always say yes, and you need to take your sons to see that too.
Right.
Of course you need to take your daughters, but it's not just for them. It is about a formative moment in American history, and it belongs to all of us. It should belong to all of us. Real Women Have Curves is a fictional story, but it's a fictional story about a very impressive young person who's probably going to go on to do great things, and the beginning of one of the most remarkable acting careers of the 21st century. And it's a great movie, so reason enough for any of us to see it, whether or not we look like the people in it.
That's a very good point. You mentioned Greta Gerwig. I was talking with a friend the other day, and I mentioned that we were recording a podcast episode about this movie, and she said that she had heard that Lady Bird was kind of a knockoff of Real Women Have Curves. And I don't know if Greta Gerwig has ever spoken to that comparison specifically, but to your point about stories that are relatable to everyone, Lady Bird and Real Women Have Curves are both stories about a mother and daughter. There's some other overlap and similarities there, but I don't know, does that make it a ripoff? I mean, how many stories are there about two guy friends that aren't accused of ripping off this one or that one? That's just not part of the conversation. And is that only part of the conversation because we're talking about women, so there's this extra scrutiny around it?
Real Women Have Curves was made in a very different time than Lady Bird was made. I mean, there's a 16-year difference between those two movies, and the very project of making movies was very different at those two times. They were both low-budget movies, lower-budget movies. Lady Bird had the advantage of being directed by not only an established actor, but starring an actor who was already famous. And I suppose you could dig into it and say, maybe we paid more attention to Lady Bird because of the high profileness of Greta Gerwig over Patricia Cardozo. I don't know. I just like to say that when people ask what Lady Bird is, I say it's Real Women Have Curves set in Sacramento. And when people say, what's Real Women Have Curves? I'm like, I'm glad you asked.
I like that. I really, really like that. Switching gears, this is just something that kind of stuck out at me about this movie. Anna gets into Columbia after the school year has ended, June, July-ish, apparently. And I know that the teacher says that he has a friend who works at Columbia admissions. That just struck me as unrealistic, that a kid could get into college for that academic school year with just weeks to go before it's starting.
This thing with Columbia University very, very similarly happened to my father. My father was an immigrant, came to America. He was 17, took 1 year of college in New York City, spoke very little English. He was all ready to go to City College, $36 for the entire year. And he had a guidance counselor, just like Mr. Guzman. He had a guidance counselor that was French, where my dad came from. He said, there's this program for immigrants, you should apply to it. And almost like in August, he said, you got into both schools in the program, Dartmouth and Columbia. He never heard of them. My father said, which one of these two can I get to by subway? Because I got to live at home. It really happened. It was right before the school year. In this movie, yeah, he called the dean. I mean, that may or may not be a real thing. But maybe in my dad's case, someone else dropped out and that's what happened. Who knows? But this stuff does happen.
For a movie whose timeline is very much governed by the academic year, there are very few scenes that take place in school.
Yeah.
We do not see Anna taking the SATs. We do not see her in class much at all. It is really a domestic and workplace movie, even though the main character is a teenager, as opposed to a movie that takes place in school, even though it's very much about school.
Right. One thing that kind of bugged me a little bit about this movie was the way that Anna solves the financial hardship that her sister is facing with the factory when she asks their dad for money and he just gives them a loan. It's fine. And I really like the dad character and the grandpa character, actually. I think those relationships are very sweet. But sort of what I was saying before about playing with audience expectations, I would have expected Anna to do something that only Anna could do to save her sister's factory, that this is going to be her heroic moment. And she just asks dad for money, which the sister could have done too. And if he had all this money, why didn't he just lend her the money? It seemed like an obvious solution. It's not a huge deal, but that was just something that kind of irked me about the movie, that Anna should have done something else than just ask dad for money.
I agree with you.
Okay.
But also, I'm glad also at the same time that the 17-year-old doesn't think of like, how about a bake sale and the whole city comes together. Yeah, so obviously it wouldn't be as cheesy as that. But, you're right. It's maybe not the best thing, but it's also, I think, realistic. A bank wouldn't have given them the loan. Maybe the father could have said maybe something about how he really didn't want it because he was saving it for your college. But now that you got a full scholarship, who knows, maybe something like that.
I love that. That is great. Yeah, something like that. I also thought that maybe the mean boss lady was going to come back. They have that one confrontation scene and she's super rude. Again, just conventional movie wisdom. Oh, that's going to come back around. There will be another scene where she gets her comeuppance, or Anna puts her in her place, or they do have the money, or they demand a higher profit margin or something. And I think it's probably ultimately to the movie's credit that it doesn't have a moment like that, because that would be cheesy. That would be cliche. That would be the expected thing to do. And I think that what this movie really leans into is the word real in the title. It's about realism.
That's very well put. I think the thing that we first and foremost ask a movie to be is itself.
Yes.
And not what it thinks it should be. I don't mean to anthropomorphize a movie, but a movie is made by people. I'm really glad you said that, because I think Real Women Have Curves is very respectful of its own parameters and the world it sets for itself. It doesn't try and act according to some structure or set of parameters that you feel like has been grafted over it from the outside. I think real is inherently what it is.
Yes.
It's very easy to watch something like this because it is not an unconventional or unheard of story. In a lot of ways, Real Women Have Curves is a genre film. It is a coming of age, last semester of high school story, which is an old and serviceable trope. Booksmart is a last semester of high school story.
Sure.
Many great movies follow this formula. So we would all be forgiven for wondering, will it at some point cave into the cliches of this formula? It is to its credit that it does not.
Yes. Agreed. Well, Kevin, let me ask you. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say here, but do you think that Real Women Have Curves stands the test of time?
It absolutely does. Like I said at the beginning, we cannot separate the fact that the endurance of Real Women Have Curves is directly connected to the meteoric rise of America Ferrera. Sadly, Patricia Cardoso did not benefit as much from the success of Real Women Have Curves. She's done just fine for herself. She has an acclaimed teaching career. She's on the Academy Governing Board. And she's done very well in the age of streaming television because she has very good relations with several screenwriters. So I believe she shot for the Tales of the City miniseries and many other streaming programs you've heard of. I wish there were a dozen Patricia Cardoso movies, but I feel very honored not only that I got to spoke to her, but that I have Real Women Have Curves, because Real Women Have Curves is really one of those movies that when people say recommend me something, which happens, you guys know, happens to anybody who loves movies, you are often caught flat-footed.
Sure.
Because you start counting them on your fingers and you don't know when to stop. Or you're thinking to yourself, this has got to be good because that's why the person asked me. And so what is the perfect match between that person who asked and movie? And when I'm stumped, I almost always say Real Women Have Curves. And I'm really wrong. Not because I'm a genius, but because the movie is.
I love that. And honestly, I think it's fair to say that this movie would not have been on James and my radar had you not suggested it. So I am glad that you suggested it to us for this podcast. But James, do you think that the movie stands the test of time?
I do. It's about women, and it's 95% of the cast is women. But again, like one of these big fat Greek wedding things, there's so many other things that I can relate to, and I'd seen in my life, and of course, pressure from the family to do what they expect. And I think a lot of these things are universal, and that takes a lot. It's also surprisingly way more English than I thought it would be. I love when the Spanish comes. It's like when they get very emotional, and the older the generation is speaking more Spanish, so very realistic there. The movie is just a regular family, so nothing extraordinary is going to happen, really. I think the film stands the test of time. I enjoyed watching it. Al, what do you think? Are we going for a clean sweep here? Does Real Women Have Curves stand the test of time?
Yes, this movie 1,000% stands the test of time. Gun to my head, I had to pick anything that doesn't stand the test of time. Jimmy, the boyfriend, his laptop is kind of laughable looking, the Apple thing with the color on it. And he's really, really impressed with this program that he found on the internet that says curses in Spanish. Whoa. And, look, in 2002, that would have been the highlight of what you would find on the internet. So it's fine. It's funny. And then there's also the moment where the mom is listening in on Anna's phone conversation with Jimmy because he calls the landline and she picks up on her receiver in her room and she can just listen on the other line in the kitchen. That's a thing that happened back when everyone had landlines, and that wouldn't happen now. Although if you needed to update it, it could very easily just be the mom tracking Anna with her iPhone or Life 360 or something, and that's how she knows that she's got this boyfriend. So those are minuscule details. This movie is wonderful. It is timeless in its themes of family and expectations and what you want to do and what the world expects of you, and being who you are and being proud of who you are, and not caring about not just the expectations of your mother, but the expectations of society. And this is what you're supposed to look like. And who cares? You do not have to look like anything. For our listeners, that's why James and Kevin and myself have been recording this episode in our underwear, because we're proud of our bodies. We are not ashamed of our cellulite. No. Although we should have. I definitely think this movie stands the test of time. It is every bit as relevant now as it was when the movie first came out. I'm guessing when the play was first released. Also, by the way, it's going to be adapted into a Broadway musical
Yes.
But Kevin, thank you so much for bringing this movie to our attention and for sharing your insights with the director. I mean, that's really cool. We don't always get that in a regular episode. So thank you so much, Kevin.
Gentlemen, thank you. It was really great to see you again.
We will have to have you back on the show. That will be your 5th appearance. That will bring you into a very exclusive club.
Very exclusive club.
The book, Break the Frame, Conversations with Women Filmmakers, comes out on May 22nd, and everyone should pre-order it now.
Absolutely. More details at breaktheframebook.com.
Excellent, excellent. And I see you've got a couple of events where you're going to be talking about the book, maybe signing copies, perhaps?
Yes, I will be in New York at Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn on June 4th.
Okay, very, very cool. I can't wait to read the book. Brat Pack America was wonderful, and you're so knowledgeable and smart and a great writer, which, those things don't always overlap. And so when you get that perfect Venn diagram, there's nothing better.
Thank you for saying so.
Thank you again for joining us. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about another movie from 2002, another movie about family also, Lilo and Stitch. Very excited to talk about that one. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate that. That helps people find the show. And we'll see you next time, everyone.
Take care.